So hi everyone and welcome to the latest edition of You Are My Boro with myself, Scott Wilson and Dom Shaw from the Northern Echo. And Dom, as we've got to say it, and it's live!
So that's why you wanted to host it this morning.
Yes, we're live, straight into your living room, workplace, goodness knows, on your phone, wherever you are. But yeah, we said we'd do this. We said we'd have a back and forth. So if you're watching, please get in touch with any questions, any issues, any thoughts, anything you want us to talk about on the Boro front. We've had quite a few already when we flagged up we were going to do this last night, so that's obviously good. Very quick bit of housekeeping. If you're watching on YouTube, then please like, subscribe, and comment on the vid. If you're listening on any of the various podcast platforms, then rate, review, and let us know what you think. We're always really keen to know what you're thinking of what's going on. Before we get into the questions, everything all right, Dom? Decent week? It's there's bits and bobs bubbling along, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm sound, mate. I'm sound. Bit of England talk before we get started. What's your
let's do a very, very quick bit of England talk. I don't think we need to gloss over it too much. They've somehow managed to make it into the quarterfinals over in Germany. I mean, listen, there's two ways of looking at it, this, isn't it? One, they're absolutely dreadful. The first time they come up against a good team, which is likely to be Switzerland this weekend, they're going to go out. Or somehow they're finding a way to scramble through. And Southgate being Southgate and England being England, who knows where this might take them? It might take them all the way.
I could not believe it. I was watching that the other night. I mean, I'm screaming at the telly for changes and where's Anthony Gordon and whatever else. And then, that last minute goal. One former Boro manager takes inspiration from another. Tony Pulis inspired long throw, launched it. And does the rest. Those two games yesterday were garbage, weren't they? I thought they had the Slovenia you knew Slovenia were going to make life difficult, but I thought that France-Belgium game would be better than it was. But
so I'm going back out on Friday. I'm at the game on Saturday. To be perfectly honest, the thing I'm most looking forward to about going back out there is watching Germany-Spain in a bar on Friday night in Germany. Because that, for me, they're head and shoulders the two best teams in it. You'd imagine whoever wins that will go on and win the whole thing. They deserve to on what we've seen so far, but that's got game of the tournament written all over it, hasn't it? Never mind England, Switzerland, goodness knows.
Yeah.
That Germany-Spain game should be an absolute cracker.
It has. The only problem is you're on an early flight. That's going to be an early day starting on the bevies. Come kick-off time. You're not going to remember it come the Saturday morning.
No, anyway. That's the thing. I need to behave myself on the Saturday.
That's the final, isn't it? It's the two best teams. It's that if you had it ideally, that'd probably be on the final.
It definitely feels that will be the standout game of the tournament. But anyway,
let's crack on.
Let's get stuck into some Boro issues. Enough of England underplaying. Let's see what the mighty Boro is going to do next. Right, I've lined a few up. So let's start with a one we had in on Twitter, X, whatever the hell you want to call it nowadays. Mark Andrews, what's the latest on the Lewis O'Brien situation? So, Dom, Aidan Morris is through the door. We know that. He's here. He's obviously done his first interview with a club. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see him fairly early in pre-season. But stuff still rumbles on with Lewis O'Brien and whether Boro need another midfielder. So what's your take on the Lewis O'Brien situation? And then I guess branching out from that, do we still expect another centre midfielder to come through the door this summer or is Morris that?
Well, the Lewis O'Brien situation, like the speculation is rumbling on because clearly he is a player who needs a move this summer and Forest want to sell him and his representatives want to move him on. So like the speculation will probably keep coming, but he will not be re-signing for Boro. Boro kind of made that decision at the end of last season. They moved on from him. Obviously, Morris was identified as the leading midfield target. They got him in early doors again. And although the O'Brien talk might still linger, if it does, that's all speculation. He's not a player Boro are interested in re-signing this summer. I think there are a couple of things really. First of all, the finances were always going to make that incredibly difficult. I think Kieran Scott said that on the record when we spoke to him earlier this summer, didn't he? How if they're going to sign loan players, they want it with a view to a permanent move. That it was difficult with O'Brien because he was in is clearly on a significant wage at Nottingham Forest. But last summer he was just identified as a player like it could be a gem of a signing. He's one of the best players. Yeah. He was one of the best midfielders in the Championship last time he was playing at this level. So there's obviously that. And I think the other thing in Morris, they believe they've maybe signed a more complete midfielder. That's nothing at all against O'Brien, but Morris kind of, looking at him, the profile of him, he ticks all the boxes, doesn't he? He's effective. He's as effective out of possession as he is in possession. And he might, hopefully, prove to be the successor to Johnny Howson. Now, again, hopefully that's no time soon. But clearly the thinking is that when Howson does decide to hang up his boots, that they have someone already in place. I think the other thing on the midfield is, obviously there's been a little bit of speculation on Barlaser, but as of the start of last week, anyway, there'd been no contact from Trabzonspor and to Boro over Barlaser. How that plays out, we're not sure. But as things stand, like Boro are happy with like what they deem to be a strong 5-man battle in midfield with Law McCabe in there after his emergence last season. They'll give Morris time, which we've talked about on here, haven't they? He's obviously halfway through an MLS season or however it works out, but he's been playing a lot of football. And I noticed in the video that put out yesterday, pre-season, he was understandably kind of doing his own thing and kind of easing his way in. But the beauty there is you've got a fully fit Hackney, you've got Howson, you've got Barlaser, you've got McCabe. So you can ease Morris in, can't you? Unless Barlaser goes. Clearly, like if there's a bid for Barlaser, then there's a decision to be made there. Unless he goes, I can't see there being any more movement in midfield, any more incomings in midfield. That looks strong to me now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see Morris. I think everything you've heard about him, everything you've seen, obviously the way that he left Columbus Crew and everything, you know, I think that could be the signing of the summer for Boro. I think it could be the most exciting one. And I'm with you. I think that if Barlaser stays, then I think that is your midfield unit. You're more than well enough stocked there. You know, as you say, our understanding is there isn't really anything in this Trabzonspor stuff. But what is interesting is just the fact that his name is suddenly bubbling around out there, which suggests at the very least that his agent is potentially looking to see what options are out there and having a think about it. Wouldn't surprise me if Barlaser moved on this summer. And then I think Boro probably do have to bring in one more because, as you say, there's very high hopes for McCabe, but you know, if he's your number 4, then you're leaving yourself in a scenario where, you know, if Hackney or Howson or whoever gets a long-term injury, then McCabe probably has to play a lot more football than you would maybe ideally want him at this stage. So I think if Barlaser goes, probably another midfielder, but I'm with you. If he doesn't, then I think that's that for Boro in terms of that part of the pitch.
And what about this one then from Paul Smith? If there was one thing missing from this Boro team, what would it be? And would you envisage it being addressed before the 13th of August? I think we've talked about it.
I mean, the obvious things up front, isn't it? You know, we keep coming back to it. You know, that is the area that still feels like it needs fairly major surgery. I think a lot of other parts of the pitch now, because they've done such good business early, you're kind of talking about tinkering around the edges a bit, improvements here, there. It's up front where there's still a gaping gap. I mean, you know, we've said Latalat's form at the end of last season makes him the number 1 going into next season. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But there's big question marks over Josh Coburn's fitness. I think there's still question marks about whether he can actually do it week in, week out in the Championship anyway, because he hasn't had a chance to categorically prove that yet. So I think that, you know, though going in with those two, you're far, far, far too light. Even more accentuated by the fact that those doubts kind of hang over Coburn. So there has to be at least one new forward through the building this summer. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a couple. We've touched on this before. You know, pre-Latalat's kind of sensational form at the end of last season, I think Boro would have been going into this summer thinking we need a number 9. We need someone who can be the leader of the line.
Well, just to very quickly put in this links with that.
Yeah, it does.
So what type of striker do Boro need? So yeah, go on.
So I think at the minute they're looking at it and thinking ideally we want someone who can push Latalat and potentially replace Latalat if anything was to happen to him, but who can also play with him. So I think all of a sudden you're looking at probably a more creative, ball-playing, versatile forward than maybe Boro thought they would be looking for in January time before Latterlath kind of exploded into life. Listen, if Boro get offered a Latterlath type number 9 who will lead the line and they think it's a good deal, I think they'll do it because they still need, they need options and numbers up there. But I think now, if they're being offered strikers more in the mould of a versatile forward who can play anywhere across a front three, can play out wide, can play through the middle if they're needed, a la Morgan Rogers in many ways, I think that's probably what Boro will be looking for now, rather than a out-and-out line-leading, let's say a Kiefer Moore style number 9. I'm not sure Boro necessarily want that anymore. I think they want a more versatile forward. Do you?
Well, I think Bergzorg is what you've talked about there. I think Delano Bergzorg will come in and like obviously he's played up front, but from what we're told, he's equally as comfortable as a number 10 and effective off the left, which gives you options.
They still need another one though, don't they?
Oh yeah. So I think, like guessing, but I suspect we'll see Bergzorg playing more in those deeper roles, and then I think that suggests that you probably need another out and out centre forward. But
do you think that?
But I think if they did, it'd be someone who's similar to Latterlath, because although like previously you'd look at managers and maybe say that they'd like different options up front. Well, that's not necessarily the case with Carrick, is it? He wants players who play whose strengths match the way Boro play. So whether if you can bring someone in who can play up front and play as a number 10, then that's ideal. But I do still wonder. I do still think the one short of an out and out centre forward, a centre forward, someone who comes in as a striker.
The fact that Bergzorg is through the door and is here now and will hit the ground running at the start of pre-season probably buys some time. So while I don't think we're looking at Boro going back to Archer, because I think it'll be far too expensive and will potentially end up in the Premier League, I wouldn't rule out it going a bit quiet on the front man now, and we're going back to a Premier League loan come the end of the window. I could see that as a potential because, like I said, the fact that Bergzorg is here means to a certain extent the need to do something quickly has been lessened a bit. And I do wonder if they'll have a look at that Premier League market a bit later in the window. I know Kieran Scott's been saying there's a reluctance to do loans where there's not a chance to buy at the end of it. They don't want to get themselves in a scenario last summer rather, where all their loan players had gone. I buy that, in that you don't want 4, 5, 6 players like that. I still think one top-class Premier League loan of a youngster, if you can get it, can potentially be transformative for pretty much any club in the Championship.
Yeah, I mean, on the Archer thing, because it's something that fans have obviously talked about, but the suggestions, certainly when we've asked the question earlier this summer, was that he hadn't been discussed just because of how unlikely it would be. Villa are said to favour another permanent sale. Archer is said to favour Premier League football, and there's obviously the finances to take into account there. It's one of them, isn't it? Obviously, if you can bring a player like Cameron Archer in and do a deal that pleases you, similar to Ryan Giles, which I'm sure we'll get to, then obviously you do. But yeah, the indications earlier this summer was that it felt unlikely. And as for loans, the Will Lancashire link obviously emerged at the start of this summer, but again, that was nowhere near as strong as what the reports were suggesting. He's a player Boro watched last season, but he's kind of on a list of, like you say there, young Premier League strikers who they'll watch in the eventuality, or in the event that they do need to dip into the loan market at some stage, so they then know kind of who they're looking at, what the strengths are, how likely they'd be to come and make an impact in the Championship. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. All the suggestions, so as you allude to there, is that Boro are happy to be patient on the striker front now. They've ticked 3 big boxes early doors. Ticked 3 big boxes within a week of pre-season starting. And if you went into the start of the season now, having not signed another striker, it's by no means a disaster, is it? Because you've got the striker on your books who was the league's most informed frontman at the end of last season. So 100% agree. It does buy Boro time, doesn't it?
We'll jump to another one in a second, but just while we're on with strikers, what do you think with Josh Coburn? It feels like, I don't want to say make or break because he's still very, very young. You know, you forget how young he still is, but it feels like it's a massive season for him, doesn't it? It feels like this really has to be the season where he shows that he's a kind of, you know, Boro prospect for the long term.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, haven't we? I think it was so desperately frustrating for him last year because his injury came at a time when he was just starting to establish himself. Really, he was playing regularly. He looked comfortable. He was in good form. But I think it's still impossible to judge like how capable he is of leading the line for a championship promotion team. I think Coburn's got an awful lot to offer, and I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. I guess the decision you've got to make is if you bring a centre forward in, another centre forward in, would Coburn benefit from a season playing regularly in the championship? I don't even know whether that. Yeah. I haven't spoken to anyone about that. I don't know whether that's in Boro's thinking, but it feels like he needs to be playing, doesn't it? It feels like he'd benefit more. But then if he's fully fit, he's likely to be used more, isn't it? Even if he's not as a starter, he's likely to still get a lot of football at Boro. I think it all depends really on who comes in. But I would imagine like Coburn will have reported back for pre-season, desperate, determined to take his chance, because last year was an opportunity missed through absolutely no fault of his own, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we touched on Cameron Archer. Let's go to the other name that keeps reappearing.
Ryan Giles.
There we go. Ryan Giles. Danny Beardmore. Are Boro confident if the opportunity arises around Giles that we can sign him? There seems to be a lot of noise around it. There does. Now, obviously, the whole move has gone through, but as you wrote in a piece earlier this week, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's off the table and that Boro are kind of out of the running to sign him. So where do you think that one's at? And what about the wider left-back picture at Boro?
Well, I think the thing with Giles and Hull is from now changed from Boro's perspective, because they always expected that Hull deal to go through, didn't they?
Yeah.
Hull have said it's an option. Hull said when he signed, and they said when they signed him on loan, and they said again when they made the deal permanent that it was an option. But there's been strong suggestions that it was an obligation rather than an option, doesn't there? Which does change things undoubtedly.
And the fact that it sounds like Hull were attempting to renegotiate that with Luton. There was certainly talks before the deal went through. Now, you know, maybe we're putting 2 and 2 together and getting 7 here, but you do wonder if Hull have actually got to the point where they're obliged to sign him and have actually thought, you know what, that money could be used in far better areas. But in the end, they've had to do the deal, which maybe creates a window for Boro.
Yeah, because I think there's a few things at play, isn't there? Like, first of all, the manager's changed. So Tim Walton's come in and replaced Liam Rossini, who was the manager in the second half of last season when Giles was on loan there. Secondly, like Giles wasn't a roaring success there by any means. I think it was the last 8 games. He didn't start any of them. He was on the bench. They've got, is it Matty Jacob? The young left back there who only signed a new long-term deal himself in March. And then the other factor to consider, which is a significant factor, as has been proven in the North East in the last few days, is the financial fair play situation at Hull. Their owner has admitted that they can't do as much as what they'd like to do this summer because of restrictions, and that they might have to trade, which again makes it interesting. I think similar to, as we just said with the striker thing, that there's an acceptance that if there's anything to be done on Giles, it's likely to be later in the window. Nothing's going to move or happen anytime soon. But Giles, I think it's kind of widely accepted that he maybe made the wrong decision in signing for Luton rather than Boro 12 months ago. You can understand why he did it because of the Premier League move and all that come with that. But Michael Carrick and Boro are the coach and the club where they've got the very best out of him. He's at an age now where he can't afford to keep letting seasons pass him by. From Boro's perspective, there's kind of always been the case, hasn't it? If something presents itself, they'll do it. The preference would be a loan with a view to a permanent move. Hull are reported to have paid $4 million for him. I don't think we'll see Boro paying anything like that for him. Yeah. Don't know. I'm guessing maybe half that. But again, if it was doable, if they can get Giles, then they'll move If it's doable, then they'll move for it. If they don't, I think they're going into the season happy with Engel and Bangura. There was a link with, is it Max Lowe last week, which obviously we talked about, which was nonsense. There was no interest there. It's not like they're scouring the market for a left back.
They're not desperate for a left back.
Giles, they're happy to go in with what they've got.
Let's switch to the opposite flank then. And one of the live comments from Will Tyerman. Will, how far off is Smith? Do you reckon we'll bring in another right back, as it looks like Dijksteel might be going?
Well, what do you think? I mean, Ayling's going to start the season as first choice, isn't he? Smith is not in full training yet, but he's back training. If you think Smith's going to be fully fit by a month into the season, then I think you go with what you've got, don't you? Even if
I do. I mean, you've got to remember it's only the first week of July. I mean, while he's not in full training yet, we're a month off 5 weeks actually off the first game of the season. So I think there's a good chance that come the start of the season, Smith will have been involved in some of the latter pre-season games. And if he's not ready to start that first game, he's not going to be far off. Ayling clearly is coming in as the number one. He more than earned that spot with the way that he played in the second half of last season. I think if Ayling's your number one and Smith's your number two, and Boro do have a number of players who, if the worst came to the worst and there was a massive injury crisis in that position, well, Johnny Howson can play there if he has to. Isaiah Jones can play there if he has to.
Van den Berg can move over and play there.
Van den Berg can move over and play there if he has to. So I think Dijksteel will leave. I think there's an acceptance that he's too far down the pecking order now, and that for his own career, I think he will want to move, and I think Boro will sanction that. But I don't see another right back coming in. I think in Ayling and Smith, they're more than adequately covered.
And on the subject of the defence then, what about this one? This is from Dave Goldbrew, who's a regular commenter and watcher. For me, Rad van den Berg and Baldini were solid enough last season. Other than injuries, would you agree Fry and Lenihan don't stand a chance of displacing them? I'm not sure that I'd go along with not standing a chance.
Yeah.
But I think on merit, Van den Berg and Clark, I was going to say Baldini there. Van den Berg and Clark start the first game, don't they?
I think they do, unless things radically change during pre-season. I mean, it feels like Ralph van den Berg has got himself to a point where he is now the future of that Middlesbrough defence. He's your number one. For me, he is the first defensive name on the team sheet. He starts. So who plays alongside him? Well, all three have their arguments and have their claims. Clearly, Clark is the man in possession. I think you're right. I think as things stand at the moment, if you were picking a team to start the season tomorrow, it would be Van den Berg and Clark. That said, like I say, we've got a month of pre-season. Carrick will be watching them in training. There'll be pre-season matches. There might be knocks, niggles, whatever along the way. Fry and Lenihan will be going into this season both feeling that they need to be and deserve to be in that starting side. I think that battle for the centre-half spot is going to be as interesting and as kind of difficult to call as any position on the pitch for Boro this season, because, Fry and Lenihan are top-notch, experienced championship centre-halves who won't want to be sat on the bench at this stage of either of their careers. So I think it's a really interesting one. And how Carrick manages that will be interesting, I think, because come January, if any of those centre-backs have barely kicked a ball in the first half of the season, then I think there's going to be real questions over what happens to them in January, because I don't see you can keep all four of them happy. It's not like you've got young lads in there who will take dipping in and out of the team and accept that kind of for the good of their career, just being in and around the squad is good enough at the moment. All four of those centre-halves will feel they deserve to be nailed on starters. And clearly, unless Carrick changes system, which is exceptionally unlikely, two of them aren't going to be. So I think that's interesting. I struggle to see how you keep the four of them happy.
Well, we talked to Kieran Scott about this, didn't we, earlier in the summer? And he talked about how Michael Carrick's got a real problem in the positive sense, obviously, in that he's got four. I think he described them as top class centre halves there, battling for position now. Four centre halves who would get in at the best, undoubtedly, in most, if not all, championship teams, wouldn't they? And I think the kind of interesting thing there is you'd always want three, wouldn't you? You'd always want three. And a year ago, I'm sure they'll have looked at it and thought, well, we've got the three in Vandenberg, Fry, and Lenihan. But as Kieran Scott said, like, Matt Clark surprised everyone really, because nobody's come back from the injury he's come back from in such impressive fashion. He was brilliant, wasn't he, at the end of last season?
Oh yeah.
And if he continues that, and I think it's, it coincided with not just individually brilliant, but it coincided with a real strong run of Boro form, didn't it? And the other thing is, with Vandenberg, you think he's only going to get better, isn't he? Last year was his first full season in a defence that was changing every single week because of injuries. So it's interesting. On the subject of Kieran Scott, this one from Reese, man, thanks Reese. Kieran Scott mentioned the 4 or 5 players of real quality. Do you think the 3 we've made meet that criteria? Any chance we sign a number 10 to go with the striker? Well, we've touched on that already, but the 3 that we've made meet that criteria undoubtedly, I think.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to say not, isn't it? I mean, Ayling, we know what we're getting. He, as I say, more than proved himself in the second half of last season. We know his qualities. We know his defensive qualities, but he also showed his qualities going forward. The number of assists he racked up in the second half of last season, that's going to be a big part of Boro's play again this term. So that's a definite yes. Aidan Morris, well, everything, like I say, we've seen and heard about him in terms of his performances for Columbia's Crew, US International, clearly made a massive impact in that club that he's just left. We need to see him in the Championship. That's the caveat. But everything that you've heard and seen about him suggests yes. And then Bergzorg's slightly more of an interesting one. You wouldn't look at his numbers from Huddersfield last season and say he cries out as being a top-notch Championship player. But there's a lot of mitigating factors there. He's playing in a poor Huddersfield team. Positionally, he changed around an awful lot. The way that Huddersfield played didn't really go through him an awful lot. I don't think it made the best of him. And I think with that one, you've just got to back Boro's scouting team. In the same way that they backed themselves over Morgan Rogers, over Finn Azaz, over Latalath. I think you've got to give them the fact that if they've watched him week in, week out for Huddersfield, way more than any of us have, and are confident that there's a player there that is better than the bare stats of what he produced for Huddersfield last season, then I think you've got to back them, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of that. This one from Airsom Rob, which youth player or other fringe player could have a big pre-season to put themselves around the first team picture? Well, we'll start with the youth players. James Wilson obviously made his debut. It was the last day of last season.
Yeah.
Sonny Finch, we've talked about previously on here. We know how Michael Carrick thinks so highly of him. Obviously, his progress was disrupted by injury last year, but he was back fully fit, and I've seen him in pre-season training. There are so many who got a chance at the end of last season. Like, clearly, the thing to judge here is when they're ready, isn't there? AJ Matthews was another one who made his debut at the back end of last season. Obviously, there's a bit of uncertainty as things stand about his future. There's been links with him elsewhere. Boro want to keep him. We'll see how that one plays out. But what we've seen is Michael Carrick will give the players a chance. It's that balance, isn't it, between dipping the toes in and then deeming them ready to be regulars, as Law McCabe was deemed to be ready last season.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if anyone makes that step.
I think of all the names you've mentioned, Finch is probably, for me, the most interesting one because Carrick has talked about him quite effusively. I think that, there is a feeling that there's potentially a really good player there. It's how you develop him and what's going to be best for him. I think probably for all the names you've mentioned there, pre-season is going to be interesting in terms of how many minutes they get, what they do, and then really for all of those players, there'll be a decision to make at the end of it. Right, do we keep them here and do they just play regularly at their kind of under-21 academy level and dip in and out with the first team? Do we keep them here and get them into that first team squad because they're ready now and they can fight for a place and they're part of that squad? Or would they benefit from a season out on loan? And I think there'll be some that will leave on loan because most of the players we've mentioned there haven't really had that yet. And so I think there will be players leaving on loan. But I also think there's one or two that Carrick will think, do you know what, we'll keep them certainly for the first half of the season because I think they're ready to be in and around it now.
And on the subject of loans, I know they're not youth players as such, but they're academy graduates, Sol Bryn and Zach Hemming, that we've talked about at length.
Well, that's another issue, isn't it?
Yeah, we won't go into that situation at length again. But clearly, both players, if you talk about having a big pre-season to put themselves around the first team picture, well, they're coming back determined to establish themselves as the number 2, really, as the deputy. I think it's widely accepted that Seny Dieng is going to be the number 1, but I think one of those two have got every chance of being the number 2 next season. In terms of fringe players, well, Sammy Silvera went out on loan to Portsmouth this week. Yes. Season-long loan, no option, because Boro, as things stand, still deem him to be a player who can make an impact going forward. What that does is it gives you the opportunity to reassess next summer, doesn't it? See how he's fared, hopefully playing regularly in the Championship. That makes complete sense. Other kind of fringe players, maybe a decision to be made on Alex Gilbert. I know he made an impact at the end of last season, but again, if he's not going to be playing, he needs to be playing, really, doesn't he? If he's not going to be playing regularly, then would he benefit from playing regularly? Maybe a decision to be made there. Does anyone else immediately spring?
Gilbert feels like probably a likely loan, because, like you say, he did come in and he did get a chance and he did kind of take it towards the end of last season. But you would imagine if Boro are restocking in those attacking ranks, I mean, he's already Bergzorg's now part of the equation. As we said earlier in the vid, we fully expect at least one more to be coming through the door. So I think Gilbert's probably one that would be a very live contender for a loan. Beyond that, it's hard to say. I mean, as we've said, defensive wise, really, you've got 2 right backs, 2 left backs, and 4 centre halves. Doesn't really feel like there's a gap there to be loaning anyone out. Go on.
We've touched on the goalkeeper front there. Well, whoever isn't going to be number 2. So if it was going to be Glover, then clearly you've got a decision to be made on Bryn and Hemming. But if it's going to be one of Bryn or Hemming, then Glover, he was linked with a move at the end of last season, and then with whoever it isn't out of Bryn or Hemming, well, is it another loan, or do you at this point say, well, right, it's time to let them move on with a career, but we'll include a sell on, as they did with Nathan Wood, and we've obviously seen how that's.
I think you're at the point where Boro will make the decision this summer over Bryn or Hemming as a number 2, and I think Glover and whoever isn't will both be sold. That would be my view. And you've got Jamie Jones as a 3. Yeah. He's your safe pair of hands who will take training, step up on the bench if needs be, and is there doing that job. You'll have a number 2 in either Bryn or Hemming, who is, absolutely champing at the bit to get a chance, will be there all season, pushing Dieng, ready to step in if anything happens to Dieng, and Dieng's your number 1. And I don't see the value massively in another loan for Bryn or Hemming, because what you're going to learn about them you don't already know. Is their value going to go up anymore through having another year on loan? Probably not. It feels like now will be the time to say, right, okay, we have to make a decision on this now. Which one do we want to keep and which one's going to go? And then I think Glover goes as well, probably.
And finally, we've had a couple of questions on this, unsurprisingly. John Chambers, Riley McGree contract. That was me asking what we should discuss. I wasn't just sent a 3-word message. Contract. And a live one from Will. Thanks, Will. Is there any update on Riley's contract talks? I think we've discussed how positive a start to the summer Boro have made. 3 signings in already. We know they're looking at a centre forward. There's the Giles situation. The McGree thing is the kind of uncertainty that's rumbling away in the background, and it feels like there needs to be a resolution one way or another, doesn't it, before the end of the summer window?
Yeah, I think Boro will want it resolved for reasons that we've talked about on previous vids. 1 year left. You clearly don't want to run the risk of one of your big midfield assets leaving for nothing or next to nothing if his contract does run down or potentially run out. So. We know that talks have taken place. The indication that we got was that they'd hit a bit of an impasse in the second half of last season. I don't think either parties were really willing to budge on where they were at. Now, our understanding was that there will be more talks, or there have been more talks fairly recently. And the hope, certainly from a Boro point of view, was that there's still a window there for movement and for an agreement to be reached. What you're not hearing is Riley McGree being linked left, right and centre with a load of other clubs, which I think is positive, because we know his representatives have been talking with Boro. If they felt there was absolutely no chance of a deal being done, then I'm pretty certain they'd be sounding him out left, right and centre, and you'd be hearing bits of noises about, Riley McGree's interesting X, Y or Z. The fact we're not hearing that makes me think, certainly at the moment, his team think that there's a deal there still to be done with Boro. My gut feeling is that there probably will be a deal done, but clearly we're not there yet, so it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think Boro are relatively comfortable with where things are at the moment, in that they would love to keep Riley McGree, but they have a valuation of him. They have a kind of wage point that they're willing to go to. And I think their view is, well, if they're coming back and saying that's miles out, well, okay, then we'll deal with that. And, we've brought in Finn Azaz. We're looking for other attacking players. We've got Bergzorg now. And that's not to downplay the value of Riley McGree or how important he's been, because he undoubtedly has been. And he's still a player who can offer an awful lot to Boro. But I just think Boro are looking at it and saying, well, yeah, okay, all of that's true, but there's a point we're willing to go to, and actually we're not really willing to go much beyond that. I think there will come a point later this summer where it'll almost be take it or leave it. And if the deal's not in the offing, then Boro will kind of say, right, okay, well, what's option B? Option B is to sell then.
I think the other thing with McGree, while and you kind of alluded to it there, while there's no doubt Riley McGree is a hugely influential and effective player for Boro, this is on the back of what was a disappointing season for him. He didn't play much football. When he was playing football, it felt like he was still getting up to speed rather than back to his best. And Boro do have options on that side, don't they? Azaz played a lot of football there. Bergzorg, we know, can play there. Gilbert can play across the forward line. So this feels like, even without what's going on, this feels like a big season for McGree, really.
Yeah.
He's showed how effective he can be and is for Boro. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We've had a live comment. Both the name of the commenter and the question makes me wonder whether he's dropped the comment into the wrong video, but maybe it's in reference to a bit of Euros chat at the start. Billy Ocean, 77. Austria have been just as impressive as Germany for me. They have been, haven't they? And England would play them in the semis, potentially?
Yes, England will play Austria. Yeah. I'm just thinking there, red light spells danger. That's Billy Ocean, isn't it?
Oh, I saw the cogs.
It's not quite red lights, but it's red strips, isn't it? So yeah. I mean, Austria have been. I think Turkey will give them a game tonight. Mind, I think Turkey. They're without Kalanoglu, aren't they? He's suspended, and he's a massive player for them. So that probably tilts me more towards Austria. They have been great though. Kind of everything that England haven't been really. Well organised, press really energetic, fearless. Full of just get up and go. Can you play like that all the way through a tournament when you haven't necessarily got absolute top class stars? That'll be interesting to see. But I mean, it's always felt since the draw opened up that, Austria v Turkey, Romania v the Netherlands tonight, one of them plays England or Switzerland in the semi-finals. Well, you're going to get a team there who, have kind of almost, no one would have fancied them to be there, but B, will definitely fancy their chances against an England or Switzerland in the semis. So, I'm interested to see how Austria go against Turkey tonight, because if they win that game looking as impressive as they have all the way through the group stage against what I think is a pretty decent Turkey side, then all of a sudden they're arguably second favourites between whoever wins out of Spain and Germany.
A bit of Euros talk to start and finish the pod.
There we go.
A load of Boro wedged in between. Thanks so much for watching, listening. Thanks to those who've contributed and fired questions at us. Keep doing that, by the way. If there's anything you want us to discuss on future pods and vids over the course of the summer, just drop into the comments and we'll get to that.
You've got to drop that very last one in.
Let's go there then before we finish. Come on then, unlimited budget, design your perfect service station. I'll go first. There's got to be a Greggs. There's got to be a Greggs there.
Yeah. I think Greggs have now become. I mean, controversially, I'm not overly that bothered about a McDonald's really.
No,
I'd have a Greggs above a McDonald's in a service station. I think think you've got to have a Greggs. You've got to have some W.H. Smith style thing with a few magazines, bit of coffee, bit of flapjack.
Yeah,
that's got to be an option. That's
do not be fooled into thinking I'm a regular frequenter at these haunts because I'm Aldi through and through. But I think you've got to have a Waitrose or an M&S for your sandwich.
For your sandwich, yeah. I think you're right. I think you definitely need that. I mean, clearly, if you're moving into the kind of TBA world, then a proper deli with like a nice sausage roll and all of that kind of thing, that's elevating it to your next level. You're not going to get that in your bog standard M1 tip shelf service, are you? So I think that's probably striving a bit too far.
And also striving too far for me is when I see like Nando's and places like that, because I'm not going for a sit-down meal when I'm stopping at services.
No, that's it. No, you go to like Donington and it's almost like half of it's a massive restaurant and a Harvester's there, I think, isn't it? It's like, I'm with you. Services are in and out, really. And I've never understood either the old kind of gamblers driving games. And it's the classic Gavin and Stacey, isn't it? Where Dave Coach is doing the trip across and says, I just needed a break from the driving while he sat there on the old driving game.
The other thing that always gets me as well.
I wouldn't have that in. I wouldn't have that in me.
The other thing that always gets me as well is the massage chairs.
I've
never thought like, I could do with a coffee and 5 minutes on the massage chair.
The other one that was a danger as well was, I don't think either of them have them anymore. Certainly Birch, across the Manchester on the M62, used to have a Bookies.
It did. Yeah, I remember that from
across the bridge to it. But it definitely had a Bookies. That's dangerous.
Yeah, it is.
I know now you've got everything on your phone, blah, 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 but still, you've got to spare 10 minutes on a Saturday morning.
You're dipping in for a fourfold, aren't you, with your sausage roll and your coffee.
Yeah.
We'll come back to this. Thanks, Independent 101.
We will.
There's probably a full pod and full vid in it. I'm just amazed that the watchers, the viewers' numbers didn't tumble, which is music to our ears, really. That suggests that there's a market for our service station chat. Keep the comments coming over the summer, and we'll get to anything you want us to discuss. Do subscribe, as Scott said at the start, and we'll see you next time for our next episode of You Are My Boro.